The Emperor's confession shattered the silence like fracturing ice. "I love you," he gasped, clutching his chest as frost veined across his skin, his regal frame crumpling before her unveiled eyes. In that harrowing instant, Arabella's world teetered on oblivion's edge, her own scarred secret laid bare, the flames of her forbidden power the only hope against the ancestral malediction devouring him from within. If this pinnacle of peril ensnares your spirit, subscribe now, for the inferno of revelations yet to unfold will consume all illusions and forge unbreakable bonds. The Emperor's chamber echoed with the crackle of unnatural frost, crystals spiderwebbing across the marble floors as Thibaut's breath turned to misted agony. "I love you," he had uttered moments before, his voice a ragged whisper that sealed his doom, his once imposing frame now convulsing on the silken bed, veins of ice blooming beneath his translucent skin like veins of sapphire doom. Arabella Montrose stood frozen in terror, her hands trembling as she tore away the shroud that had long concealed her face, revealing the scorched brand upon her brow, the mark of a sorceress whose fire had been chained, now her only weapon against the curse devouring the man she cherished. In the flickering torchlight, her posture straightened with defiant resolve, her dark curls framing a gaze fierce with desperation, the elegant yet tattered gown clinging to her form a testament to her outcast nobility. How could fate twist so cruelly, binding her hidden flames to his eternal winter? She knelt beside him, pressing her palms to his chest, willing sparks of warmth to defy the encroaching chill. But the curse laughed in silence, its ancient malice unyielding. The room's opulent tapestries depicting long-forgotten battles seemed to mock her, their woven heroes triumphant where she teetered on failure's brink. Memories flooded unbidden. The rite where he had chosen her, the nights of shadowed passion, the child they had brought into this fractured world. If she failed now, not only would Thibaut perish, but their son would inherit this shadowed legacy, a throne built on frozen hearts. Arabella's mind raced through forbidden incantations, her internal wound reopening, the shame of her branded power, the rejection that had driven her to hide. Yet in this vulnerability, a spark ignited within her, a determination forged from love's unexpected forge. The air grew heavier, scented with the metallic tang of magic and the faint rosewater from her earlier bath. A ritual meant for celebration now turned to vigil. Thibaut's eyelids fluttered, his lips parting in a silent plea, his regal features, high cheekbones, a jaw carved from unyielding stone, pale as fresh snow. She leaned closer, her breath mingling with his labored gasps, whispering promises of salvation she scarcely believed. The palace beyond these walls stirred with unaware servants, their footsteps distant echoes, oblivious to the Emperor's peril. Arabella's heart pounded, a drumbeat against the silence, her flaw laid bare. The uncontrolled fire that had once destroyed, now her sole hope for redemption. As the frost crept toward his heart, she channeled a tentative ember, watching it flicker against the ice, a battle of elements mirroring their union. Success teased at the edges, melting a single crystal, but the curse surged back, stronger, as if sensing her intrusion. Despair clawed at her, yet she pressed on, her posture unyielding, body language a symphony of quiet defiance amid the vulnerability. The chamber's grand windows framed a stormy night sky, lightning illuminating her scarred aura of power restrained too long. In this moment of anticipation, the mystery of her past uncoiled like smoke. What sins had branded her, and could they now save an empire? What would you risk in such raw vulnerability, facing a love that could kill? Comment below and share your thoughts. Your insights fuel these tales. Arabella paced the shadowed antechamber of the imperial palace, her fingers twisting the edges of her heavy cloak, the fabric a barrier against the judgmental eyes that had followed her since childhood. Born to the fading nobility of House Montrose in the misty highlands of Eilder, she had once dreamed of a life unbound by secrets, but the emergence of her fire sorcery at 13 had shattered that illusion. Her father, Lord Reginald Montrose, a stern Scottish laird with a lineage tracing back to ancient clans, had viewed her gift not as a blessing but a curse, a taint from some whispered ancestral sin he refused to acknowledge. "You'll bring ruin upon us all," he had snarled, his face etched with loathing, as he arranged for her magic to be sealed by a reluctant enchanter, leaving the brand, a twisted cross of charred skin, upon her forehead as eternal reminder. Now, at 25, Arabella's desires warred within, a yearning for acceptance clashing with the fear that her power, even bound, made her monstrous. The rite of forsaken bonds loomed that evening, a grim tradition in the empire of Valtoria where nobles discarded by society, widowed, scarred, or disgraced, offered themselves in a ceremonial gathering, hoping for alliances that might salvage their fates. Unlike the grand balls for eligible heirs, this was a marketplace of desperation, held in the cavernous hall of echoes beneath the palace, where torches cast elongated shadows like accusing fingers. Arabella had arrived shrouded, her posture erect yet guarded, her body language a shield of composed isolation, the cloak's hood obscuring the brand that would invite revulsion or worse, execution under the Empire's strict edicts against unregulated sorcery. Her relationships were scant. A distant sister, Felicity, who viewed her with pity laced with envy, and a father who saw her as a liability to be bartered away. As attendants arranged the participants on a dais, Arabella stood apart, her senses attuned to the murmurs rippling through the assembled lords and merchants. The air carried scents of damp stone and perfumed desperation, the women's faces painted with false hope, their gowns mended remnants of former glory. One, a widow with tear-streaked cheeks, clutched a locket. Another, bearing a dueling scar, held her chin high in defiance. Arabella's core wound throbbed, the belief that her magic made her unworthy of love, a flaw deepened by a failed betrothal years ago, when her fiancé had abandoned her upon glimpsing her unstable flames during a heated argument. "You're a danger to all," he had declared, leaving her to her father's mercy, which proved scant. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of resilience flickered. She desired not just survival, but a place where her secrets could remain buried, where she might contribute without destruction. The Emperor's unexpected arrival sent a hush through the hall. Thibaut de Lauron, the Frost Sovereign, a French-descended ruler whose bloodline commanded the elements of winter, his presence a chill that permeated the air. Tall and commanding, with raven hair swept back and eyes like polished steel, he exuded an aura of unassailable power, his clothing a severe black ensemble embroidered with silver frost motifs. Rumors swirled. He sought no true consort, bound by a familial malediction that rendered love lethal. His court a labyrinth of political maneuvering where emotions were liabilities. Thibaut's gaze swept the dais, pausing on each woman with clinical detachment, his motivations veiled. Perhaps a need for an heir without entanglement, or a strategic alliance to quell unrest. When his eyes lingered on Arabella's shrouded form, a shiver coursed through her, not from cold but intrigue. "Why hide what others flaunt?" a lord whispered nearby, echoing the crowd's curiosity. Her internal monologue raced. "If chosen, could I endure a life unseen? My flaw, my salvation?" The Emperor's voice cut through, resonant and final. Her. I claim her for the throne. Gasps erupted, but Arabella felt a tentative intrigue bloom. Empathy for his rumored isolation mirroring her own. A secret desire to pierce his frosted exterior. In the carriage ride to the palace, silence enveloped them. The clatter of wheels over cobblestones underscoring the unspoken. Thibaut outlined the bargain. A marriage of convenience, heirs secured in darkness, her face forever concealed. I require nothing beyond duty, he stated, his tone devoid of warmth, yet his posture betrayed a subtle tension, as if his own wounds, the curse that had claimed his forebears, loomed large. Arabella nodded, her fears assuaged by the promise of protection, but her heart whispered of deeper yearnings. As they arrived at the towering spires of the palace, gilded under moonlight, she stepped into a world of opulent isolation, relationships forged in shadows, her secrets a foundation for what might become an unforeseen bond. The imperial study gleamed with polished oak and maps of conquered lands, the fire in the hearth doing little to dispel the perpetual chill that clung to Emperor Thibaut like a second skin. Arabella stood before him, her shroud intact, the weight of their impending union pressing upon her like the storm clouds gathering outside the leaded windows. The contract is clear, Thibaut declared, his voice a measured baritone, eyes fixed not on her veiled form but on the parchment before him. You shall remain unseen. I pledge no gaze upon your features, nor shall any in this realm. In return, heirs to secure the line, but no more. No shared chambers, no intimacies beyond necessity. No affection. His words hung heavy, laced with an undercurrent of reluctance, his posture rigid as if bracing against an invisible gale. Arabella's heart stuttered, shock rippling through her at the generosity veiled as indifference. In her father's house, cruelty had been the norm, beatings for perceived slights, isolation for her branded shame. Here, Thibaut offered sanctuary without demand, his elemental coldness a barrier she sensed stemmed from deeper fears. Your Majesty, she ventured, her tone steady despite the tremor in her hands. This is more mercy than I've known. But why choose one hidden when empires offer unveiled beauties? He paused, a flicker crossing his steel gaze, body language shifting subtly. A clench of jaw, a averted glance, as if her question pierced his armor. Because visibility invites peril, he replied cryptically, alluding to his curse without revelation. The inciting spark ignited when, during the contract signing in the council chamber, her father interjected with venom. Lord Reginald, his face flushed with old hatreds, leaned forward. Sire, you court disaster. Beneath that shroud lies a monster, a sorceress bound for good reason. The room tensed, advisors exchanging uneasy glances, but Thibaut's response was swift, his voice cutting like winter wind. I address my future empress, not you. Arabella's breath caught, a surge of determination flooding her. For the first time, someone defended her without knowing her truth. She signed with resolve, the quill's scratch echoing her decision to embrace this alliance, twisting her fate from outcast to consort. As preparations for the rite accelerated, whispers haunted the corridors, courtiers speculating on her mystery, servants bowing with curious deference. Arabella's internal wound ached, the flaw of her fire, suppressed yet simmering, but a romantic ember kindled. In fleeting encounters, Thibaut's presence stirred her. His scent of crisp snow and leather, the way his fingers brushed hers during a formal walkthrough, sending unintended warmth through her veins. One evening, in the gardens under a canopy of blooming night jasmine, he confided a fragment. "This union serves the realm, yet I sense in you a kindred shadow." His words, delivered with rare vulnerability, sparked her hope, challenging her isolation. The ceremony dawned with pageantry, the grand cathedral filled with nobility, their silks rustling like leaves in anticipation. Arabella walked the aisle alone, her gown a cascade of midnight velvet, posture defiant amid the murmurs. At the altar, Thibaut awaited, resplendent in imperial regalia, his expression a mask of control. Vows exchanged, the priest intoned the binding. "Claim each other in word, for the physical shall follow in private." Thibaut's claim resonated. "I take you as empress, partner in duty." Arabella echoed, her wolf stirring. Not a literal beast, but the metaphorical pull of destiny. The kiss, a chaste press to her gloved hand, respecting her shroud, eliciting gasps from the crowd. That night, in her chambers scented with lavender and candle wax, the true inciting twist unfolded. Thibaut arrived, blindfold in hand, for your comfort. In darkness, their union began tentative, his touch cool yet gentle, awakening sensations she had long denied. As bodies entwined, barriers cracked, his guarded heart yielding to her warmth, her fears melting in his care. Post-consummation, he lingered briefly, a murmur of thanks, igniting her determination to bridge their divide. Shock gave way to resolve. This marriage, born of necessity, held the seed of profound connection, propelling her toward uncharted emotional depths. Weeks blurred into a rhythm of shadowed intimacies, the palace a gilded cage where Arabella navigated rising obstacles with growing poise. Her days filled with library tomes on elemental lore, subtly probing her bound fire, while nights brought Thibaut's visits, each more fervent than the last. The bond deepened organically, conversations post-union revealing his burdens, trade pacts fraying due to the sorcery ban, his curse a silent specter. "The realm suffers for ancient fears," he confided one evening, his hand tracing her arm in the dark, vulnerability seeping through his control. Arabella offered insights, her empathy forging hope, but tension mounted as court intrigues swirled. Jealous nobles plotting against the shrouded upstart, red herrings like forged letters accusing her of espionage. Her growth manifested in boldness. Seeking counsel from a worldly courtier, Lady Genevieve Beaumont, she learned arts of allure, applying them to draw Thibaut closer. "Exhaust his reservations," Genevieve advised with a wink, her apartments a haven of silken secrets. That night, Arabella initiated with confidence, their passion escalating. Kisses trailing fire, bodies sinking in rhythmic urgency. Thibaut's groans betrayed his thawing, yet he departed at dawn, frustration gnawing at her desire for more than fleeting unions. The palace gardens became their clandestine refuge, stolen moments under arbors where scents of blooming heather mingled with his frosted aura, bonds strengthening amid whispered dreams. Obstacles intensified, her father's emissaries demanding audiences, hinting at her taint, while Felicity's letters carried veiled warnings. "Beware the emperor's chill. It consumes." One read, fueling Arabella's fears. A red herring emerged, a poisoned chalice at a state dinner, suspicion falling on her shrouded presence, testing her resolve. Thibaut defended her fiercely, his posture protective, but the incident raised stakes. Failure to prove loyalty could unravel their fragile trust. In private, passion peaked. During a storm-lashed night, he stayed longer, holding her as thunder roared, his touch conveying unspoken hope. The turning tension crested when healers confirmed her pregnancy, joy mingling with foreboding. "An heir?" Thibaut murmured, hand on her belly, his voice laced with rare warmth. Yet the curse loomed, his increasing devotion a double-edged blade. Court functions demanded appearances, her shroud a constant barrier, whispers escalating to outright challenges. Arabella's fire stirred restlessly, bound yet responsive to emotions, a subtle glow warming her skin during intimacies, foreshadowing the clash to come. Frustration built as Thibaut's visits grew earlier, meals shared in secrecy, but his insistence on distance clashed with her burgeoning hope. In a pivotal confrontation, during a council on sorcery reforms, Arabella ventured opinions through veiled notes, influencing Thibaut toward leniency. Perhaps supervised practice could heal old wounds, she suggested later, his intrigue evident. Bonds deepened, but a betrayal loomed. Felicity's arrival, eyes sharp with envy, planting doubts. "He'll discard you once the child comes." Tension frayed Arabella's nerves, her growth evident in quiet defiance. Yet the Empire's unrest mirrored her inner storm. As her belly swelled, hope flickered amid frustration. The realm's fate intertwined with their union's evolution. Would you dare trust such fragile bonds amid rising shadows? Share your reflections in the comments. Your voices illuminate these paths. The revelation struck like lightning cleaving the night. Thibaut's admission of love, uttered in the afterglow of their son's birth, triggering the curse's icy grip. Arabella cradled the infant, Beaumont, his tiny cries piercing the chamber's hush, while healers fluttered uselessly. "What afflicts you?" she demanded, her voice cracking as frost etched his skin. Thibaut's eyes, dimming yet tender, confessed, "A malediction upon my line. We cannot love without perishing, hearts encased in eternal winter." The game-changer shifted everything. Their passion, once a secret solace, now lethal. Her pregnancy the catalyst for his deepening affection. Beliefs shattered. Arabella's view of their contract as merciful indifference crumbled, revealing his choice of her as a safeguard against emotion, her shroud a supposed barrier. Vulnerability exposed, Thibaut's body language weakened. Trembling hands, labored breaths, while Arabella's posture hardened with resolve, her branded face still hidden but her aura radiating fierce passion. "I thought concealment would protect me," he gasped, regret lacing his words. Stakes soared. Not just his life, but Beaumont's future, the curse hereditary, threatening to doom their child to loveless rule. Betrayal stung as memories resurfaced. Nights of intimacy where his cold touch had warmed her soul, now poisoned by this hidden truth. "You withheld this?" she whispered, hurt mingling with love, their bond tested in fire. The shift propelled action. Arabella summoned forbidden knowledge, poring over ancient scrolls in the palace vaults, the air thick with dust and arcane whispers. A clandestine meeting with a smuggled sorcerer revealed, "Fire counters ice, but yours is sealed." Passion flared in recollection. Their unions, his moans of "You're my flame," now ironic harbingers. Courtly betrayals compounded. Felicity's accusations in council. She's the curse's vessel. Sowing dissent, forcing Arabella to confront her siblings' envy rooted in their father's lies. Emotional turmoil peaked in a private vigil. Arabella unveiling partially to Thibaut in desperation. "See my mark. Let it repel you. Reverse the curse." His gaze softened instead. "It only endears you more." Betrayal deepened as she confessed her past. A fiancé's death in flames, blamed on her unbound rage, though she swore innocence. Thibault's certainty, "You'd never harm intentionally," ignited passion anew, but the curse advanced, his lips bluing. Stakes escalated, empire teetering on regency chaos, her role as empress questioned. The midpoint closed with irreversible shift, Arabella vowing to unbind her power, defying edicts, her beliefs transformed from self-loathing to empowered savior. Passion and betrayal intertwined, their love a beacon amid encroaching winter. Insurmountable odds gathered like storm fronts over the kingdom as Prince Thibault slipped beyond waking into a death-like coma. Frost devoured him inch by inch, a merciless bloom of ice spreading across his skin until he resembled a sculpture carved from winter itself. Beautiful, untouchable, impossibly distant. Each breath was shallow, barely fogging the crystalline prison that encased his chest, as though life itself feared to linger too close. The royal chamber had become a mausoleum of waiting. Curtains remained drawn against the sun. Candles burned day and night until their wax pooled like pale tears, and servants moved in reverent silence, terrified that any sound might shatter whatever fragile thread still tethered the prince to the living world. Arabella refused to leave. Days bled into nights without distinction. She kept vigil beside the bed, her body growing weaker while her resolve hardened into something brittle and unyielding. In her arms, little Beaumont fussed and cooed, his warm weight the only proof that life still existed within those walls. His tiny fingers grasped at her hair, his innocent laughter a cruel counterpoint to the suffocating stillness of his father's frozen form. Every joyful sound from the child felt like a betrayal. The council wasted no time. Behind closed doors, beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed centuries of coronations and betrayals alike, they began to whisper. A regency must be declared. The kingdom required stability. The prince might never wake. And the princess, she was unstable, unpredictable, tainted. Arabella felt their eyes on her whenever she passed through the marble corridors. Pity from some, fear from most, contempt from a few who did not bother to hide it. Her perpetual mourning attire, her drawn face, the faint tremor in her hands, all became evidence in the silent trial against her competence. "She brings misfortune," someone murmured as she walked past. "She was always strange," another replied. Her shrouded presence, once regal, had become an omen. Worst of all was the mockery of her own power. Deep within her chest, her fire magic lay bound, coiled, suppressed, unreachable. She could feel it like a heartbeat behind a wall, hot and furious yet utterly useless. A dormant volcano buried beneath permafrost. No matter how she reached for it, begged it, raged at it, nothing answered. The ice around Thibault remained pristine, untouchable, as though her magic itself recoiled from him. Perhaps it was not bound. Perhaps it had abandoned her. Her father's voice returned in the quiet hours, sharp as a blade. "Monster, you destroy everything you love." Self-doubt seeped into every crack of her resolve until she could no longer tell whether the accusation came from memory or her own thoughts. Desperation drove her to anything that offered even the illusion of hope. Healers from distant provinces arrived bearing rare tonics, enchanted salves, and ancient remedies. None lasted more than seconds. Potions hissed into vapor the moment they touched the ice, as though winter itself rejected intrusion. Sacred relics were laid upon his chest. They froze solid and shattered. She knelt for hours in the cathedral, beneath a ceiling so high it seemed to vanish into heaven itself, praying until her voice gave out and her knees bled through silk. The candles burned low. The saints remained silent. Even the echoes of her pleas sounded hollow, swallowed by the vast stone emptiness. If the gods listened, they did not answer. Isolation tightened around her like a vice. Then came the final blow. Felicity, once confidant, once sister of the heart, revealed her true allegiance. Documents surfaced, meticulously forged, implicating Arabella in treasonous sorcery. Secret correspondence, ritual diagrams, a narrative crafted with chilling precision. Overnight, suspicion hardened into accusation. Courtiers recoiled from her presence as though she carried contagion. Conversations died when she entered rooms. Guards watched her not with loyalty, but with wariness. "You're unfit," one advisor said openly, his thin smile barely concealing his satisfaction. "The realm cannot be entrusted to instability." The words struck deeper than any blade. She fled to her private chambers, rooms once perfumed with roses and sunlight, now stale with neglect. Petals had browned and fallen, leaving only the faint ghost of sweetness in the air. The mirrors were covered. The windows shuttered. At last, alone, she broke. Tears came violently, wrenching sobs she had denied herself for weeks. She sank to the floor, clutching her arms around herself as though trying to hold together something already shattered. All the old wounds reopened: rejection, fear, shame, the lifelong belief that her very existence was a danger to those she loved. Magic as curse, love as destroyer. Perhaps this was inevitable. Perhaps every happiness she touched was doomed to freeze and crumble. Outside, a storm gathered, black clouds swallowing the moon. Thunder rolled like distant artillery, shaking the palace foundations. That night, she returned to Thibaut's side one last time, compelled by a grief so heavy it felt physical. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating his frozen face in stark, merciless clarity. For a heartbeat, the ice glowed like glass, turning him into something unearthly, neither living nor dead. She collapsed beside him, her hands pressed helplessly against the cold surface encasing his own. "Please," she whispered, voice raw, "come back to me." No warmth answered. No flicker of movement disturbed the crystalline stillness. Another flash of lightning, another thunderclap. Her pleas dissolved into sobs, swallowed by the storm's fury. In that moment, she saw the future stretching before her. Endless years of ruling alone, of watching Beaumont grow without a father, of carrying the blame for a tragedy she could neither prevent nor undo. A loveless crown, a hollow throne, a life defined by loss. Hopelessness closed over her like deep water. For a terrible instant, she considered letting it take her. But in the suffocating darkness of that thought, something shifted. Not hope, hope was too gentle a word. An ember, tiny, fragile, furious, born not of faith, but of refusal. If the world would not save him, she would. The spark flared, feeding on grief, rage, love, and desperation until it glowed with dangerous intensity. For the first time since the curse took hold, her fire did not feel dormant. Felt waiting, not restrained, contained. Arabella lifted her head slowly, eyes burning through tears. The storm outside seemed to pause, as though the night itself held its breath. "Then I will break the ice," she said softly, voice no longer trembling, "even if it breaks me with it." And in that abyss, where despair should have extinguished everything, resolve was born, sharp, unyielding, and incandescent. The darkest hour had not ended, but it had changed. Inner strength did not arrive like a sudden blaze. It rose slowly, like dawn creeping across a battlefield. Quiet, persistent, impossible to halt once begun. Arabella rode beyond the capital under cover of pre-dawn mist, leaving behind the palace that had become both prison and tomb. Word had reached her through channels too secret to trace. An earth sorceress dwelling deep within the ancient greenwood, a recluse older than the kingdom itself, a woman rumored to command the bones of the world. Desperation had led her there. Truth would keep her. The forest swallowed sound as she entered, branches knitting overhead until even the sky vanished. Moss muffled her footsteps. Roots twisted across the path like sleeping serpents. The air smelled of rain and old magic, deep, mineral, alive. Then the ground trembled. Not violently, not as an attack, as recognition. From the earth itself she emerged. The sorceress did not step from behind a tree nor descend from a hidden path. Soil parted around her like water around a rising stone. Vines slid from her shoulders. Her eyes, the color of storm-dark loam, studied Arabella with unsettling familiarity. "You took your time," the woman said. The voice struck something ancient in Arabella's memory. A lullaby half-remembered, a warmth long buried. "Aunt?" she breathed, the word leaving her lips before her mind caught up. The woman's stern expression softened, grief flickering through her gaze. "Yes, child, your mother's sister, and the truth your father tried to bury." Shock rippled through Arabella, followed by a strange, aching relief. She had always felt alone in her power, an aberration in a lineage that denied her. Now, for the first time, she stood before someone who did not fear her magic, who mirrored it. Not fire, stone, roots, the quiet strength of things that endure. They spoke for hours beneath a canopy older than any crown. Truth unfurled piece by piece, dismantling the lies that had shaped her life. Her magic was not a curse born of corruption. It was inheritance, ancient, noble, dangerous only in the hands of those who feared it. Her father's hatred had not been born of righteousness, but terror. The paternal line carried volatile power, fire that could purify or annihilate. He had witnessed what it could do. Rather than guide her, he had chosen suppression, cruelty, denial. If she believed herself monstrous, she might never discover her true strength. Love twisted into control. Protection warped into abuse. Worst of all was the revelation of the seal. The binding on her power had not been accidental. It had been placed deliberately to prevent her magic from ever reaching its full expression. Only blood of equal lineage could undo it. Only confrontation with its architect, Lord Reginald. The name alone felt like ash in her mouth. Yet alongside the fury came clarity. For the first time, her past aligned into a pattern she could see rather than a chaos she endured. She was not broken. She had been restrained. When her aunt guided her through the first true exercise of her magic, the result was not explosive fire but controlled heat. A steady, living warmth that seeped into the soil, coaxing tiny green shoots from bare ground. Life, not destruction. Tears blurred her vision. "This is what it was meant to be," her aunt said gently. "Not a weapon, a force." Hope, fragile, dangerous, took root. Before Arabella could depart, another presence entered the clearing. Felicity. For a heartbeat, rage surged so violently Arabella tasted metal. Betrayal flashed before her eyes. Forged documents, whispered accusations, the slow collapse of trust. But Felicity did not approach as an adversary. She fell to her knees. Her once polished appearance was undone, hair loose, face drawn with exhaustion and remorse. Dirt stained her gloves. Pride had been stripped away, leaving only raw humanity. "I thought I was protecting you," she said hoarsely. "Reginald showed me visions of futures where your power destroyed everything. I believed him. Gods forgive me. I believed him." Tears carved silent paths down her cheeks. When I realized the truth, it was already too late. Arabella's heart warred within her chest, fury against memory, pain against affection. This was the girl who had laughed with her in sunlit gardens, who had held her hand during her wedding, who had betrayed her with equal intimacy. Forgiveness felt impossible. but hatred felt heavier. Slowly, painfully, Arabella stepped forward. "Stand," she said. Felicity obeyed, though she could not meet her gaze. "You will not atone with words," Arabella continued. "You will atone with action." Hope flickered in Felicity's eyes, cautious, disbelieving. "I need someone who knows Reginald's tactics," Arabella said. "Someone who has seen how he manipulates fear. If you truly regret what you've done, help me end it." A sob broke from Felicity's chest, half grief, half relief. "I will," she whispered, "whatever the cost." The alliance was fragile, scarred, but real. Together, they pieced together the final truth. The seal binding Arabella's magic was anchored to Reginald himself. As long as he lived unchallenged, her power would remain constrained, enough to function, never enough to prevail. There would be no gradual solution, no safe negotiation, only confrontation, only risk, only sacrifice. When Arabella returned to the edge of the forest at dusk, the sky burned gold and crimson, colors that felt less like sunset and more like omen. Beaumont stirred in her arms, tiny fingers clutching her cloak as though sensing the shift within her. She looked back once toward the greenwood, toward the aunt who had given her truth and the friend who had chosen redemption over pride. Then she turned toward the capital, toward Reginald. Fear remained sharp, honest, unavoidable, but it no longer ruled her. Beneath it, something stronger had taken hold. Courage, born not of certainty, but of love. If she failed, she would lose everything. If she did nothing, she would lose it anyway. "I will not run again," she murmured into the gathering dark. The wind lifted her hair like a banner. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, not threatening this time, but heralding. Hope had awakened, and with it came the terrible, beautiful knowledge that some chains can only be broken by walking directly into the fire that forged them. The path to the finale lay open, and Arabella stepped onto it willingly. The storm did not follow Arabella to Montrose Manor. It awaited her there. Thunder crouched low over the ancestral estate, pressing the sky downward until the towering spires seemed to pierce a ceiling of bruised cloud. Lightning etched the iron gates in stark white for a heartbeat at a time, transforming the familiar grounds into something jagged and hostile, a place of reckoning rather than home. Arabella did not slow as she crossed the courtyard. Beaumont slept against her shoulder, wrapped in furs, blissfully unaware that the fate of his future hung on what would happen within those walls. Behind her strode Felicity, pale but resolute, the last remnants of doubt burned away by the inevitability of what they had come to do. Servants scattered as the doors burst open. Lord Reginald awaited them in the great hall, precisely where he always received guests, before the colossal hearth, framed by portraits of stern ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to judge the living. He did not appear surprised. He appeared relieved. "So," he said softly, hands clasped behind his back, "you finally chose truth over illusion." Arabella's pulse thundered in her ears. For years, that voice had commanded obedience, instilled fear, dictated reality itself. Now it sounded hollow, not powerless, but exposed. "You bound my magic," she said, each word cutting through the cavernous hall. "You lied about my mother, about my lineage, about what I am." Lightning flashed through the tall windows, illuminating Reginald's face in stark planes of shadow and light. There was no denial there, only weary acceptance. "I protected this realm," he replied. "From power it could not survive." "From me," Arabella snapped. Felicity stepped forward, voice trembling but fierce. "You manipulated us. You forged evidence. You turned us against each other." Reginald's gaze flicked toward her, disappointment sharpening his features. "You were meant to be her safeguard," he said coldly. "Instead, You became her accomplice. Enough! Arabella's voice rang with a force that made the torches along the walls gutter. Release the seal. For a long moment only the storm answered. Then Reginald smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, but with a terrible resignation. You think it is that simple? That power may be unleashed without consequence. His hand moved toward the chain at his throat. At its end hung a pendant of blackened metal, etched with runes that pulsed faintly in time with Arabella's heartbeat. The sight of it made something deep inside her recoil, recognition without memory. The seal is not merely a restraint, he said quietly. It is an anchor. Remove it, and you will become what I feared. Before Arabella could respond, Felicity moved. The punch was not elegant, not calculated. It was pure, unfiltered fury. Her fist connected with Reginald's jaw with a crack that echoed through the hall. He staggered, shock overtaking composure, and the chain snapped as he fell, the pendant skittering across the marble floor. For one suspended instant, no one moved. Then Arabella did. The metal burned her skin the moment her fingers closed around it, searing heat that should have forced her to drop it. Instead, she clutched tighter, breath tearing from her lungs as the runes flared white-hot. Something shattered. Not physically, internally. The sensation was like a dam collapsing after years of pressure. Not explosive, but unstoppable. Heat surged through her veins, not wild and destructive as before, but vast, controlled, sovereign. Fire that did not consume blindly, but obeyed. Her power had not been lost. It had been waiting for permission. Flames erupted around her, spiraling upward in a column of incandescent gold and crimson that licked the vaulted ceiling without scorching it. The torches along the walls flared in response, every spark in the hall answering her call as though recognizing their queen. Reginald watched from the floor, eyes wide not with fear, but with the dawning realization that his worst prophecy had been wrong. You mastered it, he whispered. Arabella did not answer. She was already gone. Fire did not merely surround her, it carried her. In a streak of blazing light, she vanished from the hall, crossing leagues in a heartbeat, racing not as destruction but as salvation. Back at the palace, winter still gripped the prince's chamber. Thibaut lay exactly as she had left him, encased in crystalline frost that had grown thicker, sharper, as though preparing to seal him away forever. Courtiers kept vigil at a distance, unwilling to approach the unnatural cold. Then the air ignited. Flame burst into existence at the foot of the bed, not scorching, not violent. A radiant warmth that pushed the frost back inch by inch. Arabella emerged from the fire like a figure reborn, eyes blazing with purpose, hair streaming as though caught in an unseen wind. She placed one hand against the ice. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the frost screamed, not audibly, but with a vibration that rattled glass and bone alike. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from her palm, spreading across Thibaut's frozen form. Steam erupted as heat met ancient curse, the chamber filling with swirling mist. Come back to me, she whispered, not pleading now but commanding. The ice shattered, not explosively, but like glass dissolving into light. Fragments fell away and vanished before they touched the floor, leaving only damp skin flushed with returning color. Thibaut's chest rose sharply. Air rushed into lungs that had forgotten the act of breathing. His eyes flew open, confused, disoriented, alive. Arabella? He rasped. A sob tore from her, half laugh, half cry, as she collapsed forward, clutching him with desperate relief. Warmth radiated from him, real and human, banishing the unnatural cold that had haunted the chamber for weeks. Outside, the storm broke. Clouds tore apart, revealing a sky washed clean. Across the realm, frost retreated from fields and rooftops alike, melting into rivulets that sparkled under returning sunlight. Trees shed their icy prisons. Rivers roared back to life. The curse had not merely been broken. It had been erased. Word spread with the speed of hope. The prince lived, winter was ending, the long fear had passed. Bells rang from every tower, their peals rolling across the land like waves of celebration. In the chamber, none of that mattered. Thibaut lifted a trembling hand to her face, disbelief softening into wonder. "You saved me." Arabella shook her head, tears still shining in her eyes. "We saved each other." Beaumont, awakened by the commotion, began to fuss in his cradle. A small, indignant protest that life had resumed without consulting him. Thibaut laughed weakly, the sound fragile but unmistakably joyful. The future, once a frozen wasteland of uncertainty, suddenly stretched open before them. Not perfect, not without scars, but alive. Far away, in Montrose Manor, the last traces of Reginald's binding magic crumbled into ash, taking with them the legacy of fear that had defined generations. For the first time in decades, the bloodline stood free of its own shadow. Triumph did not arrive as conquest. It arrived as warmth. And as winter surrendered to spring, the realm understood that what had been restored was not merely a prince, nor even a season, but hope itself. Spring did not merely return to the realm. It awakened it. Where frost had once strangled fields into brittle silence, new green unfurled in unstoppable waves. Rivers ran full and bright, their waters laughing over stones as though celebrating their own survival. Markets reopened, banners replaced mourning drapes, and the air carried the scent of tilled earth instead of snow. But the greatest transformation was not in the land. It was in the throne room. Arabella and Thibaut ruled side by side, not as sovereign and consort, not as savior and survivor, but as equals forged in the same crucible. The ice that had nearly claimed him and the fire that had once been bound within her no longer stood as opposing forces. Together they had become balance itself. No chains, no secrets, no fear of what power might become. Their court reflected that change. Gone were the hushed suspicions and rigid traditions that had once choked innovation. In their place rose councils of scholars, healers, diplomats, and mages, chosen not for lineage alone, but for wisdom and integrity. Voices once dismissed now shaped policy. Old rivalries softened into cautious cooperation. Most revolutionary of all were the academies. Across the kingdom, towers of pale stone and glass began to rise. Sanctuaries where magic would be taught openly, responsibly, without shame or suppression. Children who might once have been hidden away or feared were welcomed as students. Fire, earth, air, water, every discipline studied not as weaponry, but as stewardship. Arabella visited the first academy on its opening day. Young apprentices lined the courtyard, robes too large for their small frames, eyes wide with awe as she passed. Some stared openly at the faint glow that seemed to linger around her. Not fearfully, but with reverence. She knelt before a trembling girl whose fingertips sparked uncontrollably with tiny bursts of flame. "It hurts sometimes," the child confessed in a whisper. Arabella smiled gently and took her hands, letting warmth flow between them until the sparks steadied into a soft, controlled glow. "It won't always," she said, "and you will never face it alone." For the first time in her life, she was not the anomaly. She was the example. Felicity's redemption came not through grand gestures, but through quiet endurance. She refused titles or rewards, instead dedicating herself to rebuilding what her betrayal had nearly destroyed. She oversaw relief efforts in regions hardest hit by the endless winter, negotiated peace with factions who had exploited the chaos, and personally ensured the safety of displaced families. Trust returned slowly, earned day by day, not demanded. One afternoon, as preparations for a spring festival filled the palace gardens, Arabella found her standing at the edge of the crowd, watching rather than participating. "You could join them," Arabella said. Felicity shook her head, though a faint smile touched her lips. "Not yet. This feels enough." Arabella considered her for a long moment, then slipped her arm through Felicity's in a gesture both simple and profound. "You're still family," she said quietly. Felicity's composure shattered, tears spilling freely. Not of grief this time, but of relief so deep it bordered on disbelief. Justice for Reginald proved more complex than vengeance might have been. He was not executed. Instead, he was stripped of authority, titles, and influence, confined to a remote estate where he would live out his days under watch, forced to witness the world he had tried to control flourish without him. Scholars recorded his knowledge of ancient magic, not to honor him, but to ensure that fear-driven tyranny would never again masquerade as protection. Arabella visited him once. He appeared older, diminished not by punishment but by the collapse of certainty. When he saw her, something like pride flickered in his eyes, though it was quickly buried. "You proved me wrong," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "I proved fear wrong." He nodded, as though that distinction mattered more than any verdict. She left without bitterness, without forgiveness too, but with peace. Back at the palace, joy took root in smaller, more intimate ways. Thibaut had developed a habit of escaping official duties whenever possible, retreating to the gardens where Beaumont toddled unsteadily between flower beds, supervised by exasperated attendants. The prince would scoop the child up, laughing as though rediscovering the simple miracle of breath itself. "Careful," Arabella would call from the terrace, feigning sternness. "He will learn to climb before he learns to walk if you encourage him. Then he will be unstoppable," Thibaut would reply, grinning. Their love, once defined by crisis and survival, softened into something deeper, a quiet, enduring partnership built on shared scars and chosen joy. They argued, certainly, over policy, over risk, over how much freedom Beaumont should be allowed. But even those disagreements carried the unshakable knowledge that they stood on the same side. On the anniversary of Thibaut's awakening, the realm celebrated a new holiday, Renewal Day. Bells rang not in alarm, but in remembrance. Lanterns filled the night sky, each one a small star drifting upward. Symbols of lives reclaimed, futures restored, grief transformed into gratitude. From the palace balcony, Arabella watched the lights rise. Beaumont perched on her hip while Thibaut's arms circled her waist. The city below glowed like a constellation brought to earth. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing all of this?" Thibaut asked softly. "Every day," she admitted. He tightened his hold on her, not possessively, but protectively. "And yet," he said, here we are, not untouched by darkness, not guaranteed an easy future, but alive, united, unbound." Arabella looked down at Beaumont, who reached toward the floating lanterns with delighted squeals, as though determined to grasp the stars themselves. Once, she had believed her power would destroy everything she loved. Now she understood its true purpose. Not domination, not fear, but protection, creation, and the courage to keep loving even when loss seemed inevitable. Below, the crowd erupted into cheers as the final lantern ascended, glowing brighter than the rest before drifting into the endless night. Hope no longer fragile, love no longer threatened, a future no longer frozen in fear. Arabella leaned her head against Thibaut's shoulder, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with magic. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we face it together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. Always, and for the first time since the story began, there was no shadow lurking at the edge of the light, only the vast, unwritten horizon of a life transformed by fire, tempered by ice, and sustained by love.